The stars do not care what we call them. They burned before language, before thought, before the first trembling cell divided in some forgotten ocean on a world whose name is now only dust. They will burn after the last eye closes, after the final word fades into the silence between galaxies. Time, to them, is something else entirely, not a river but an ocean, vast and patient, and utterly indifferent to the small fires we light against the dark. Kalphara Vosenthin understood this. She had understood it for 347 years, through 5 different bodies, across 9 academic institutions spanning 4 star systems, and it had never once brought her comfort. She stood now in the observation gallery of the conclave station Arcturus Secundus, her 6 fingers pressed against the transparent aluminum viewport, watching the distant smear of light that had once been the hegemony defensive line at Corvin's edge. The glass was cold. Everything was cold now. The temperature regulators still functioned perfectly. The conclave built to last, built to standards that had survived 12,000 years of continuous civilization. But she felt cold anyway, in the hollows of her bones, in the space behind her ribs where something vital had been carved out and discarded. 3 billion souls had Corvin's edge, gone in 17 hours. She did not cry. The conclave did not cry. They documented, they analyzed, they convened councils and issued reports with 17-digit classification codes, and they spoke in measured tones about strategic withdrawal and acceptable losses and projected casualty cascades, and they did not cry. Behind her, someone cleared their throat, a soft, deliberate sound meant to announce presence without demanding attention, a human gesture. She had learned to recognize it. "Ambassador Vosenthin," the voice said quietly. "They're ready for you in Conference 7. Kalphara turned slowly. The human was young, at least by her species' brief standards, perhaps 30 of their years. Female, dark-skinned, with eyes that looked tired in a way that suggested weeks rather than hours. She wore a simple gray uniform with no insignia, no rank markers, nothing to distinguish her from the hundreds of other human personnel who had quietly flooded into Arcturus Secundus over the past 6 days. "Thank you," Kalphara said, her translator rendering her native Centauri into flat, functional Terran standard. "I will be there shortly." The human nodded once, then paused. "Ma'am, I'm sorry about Corvin's edge. I know there were civilians." Kalphara studied her face for a long moment. There was genuine sadness there, she thought, genuine empathy. The humans were good at empathy, she had learned. They asked questions, they listened. They seemed to actually care in a way that felt unsettling because it was so completely unnecessary. The galaxy was ending. What did empathy matter now? "Yes," Kalphara said finally. "There were." The human bowed her head slightly and left without another word. Kalphara stood alone for 3 more minutes, watching the stars, before she followed. Conference 7 was smaller than she had expected. The conclave favored grand spaces, vaulted ceilings, ornamental pillars, carefully curated acoustics that made every word feel weighty and significant. This room was functional, almost cramped. A simple table, 12 chairs, wall-mounted displays showing tactical data that updated in real time. It felt like a place where decisions were made quickly, without ceremony. 5 humans waited inside. 3 stood near the displays, speaking quietly to each other. 2 sat at the table. One of them, an older man with silver hair and lines carved deep around his eyes, gestured to the chair opposite him. "Ambassador Vosenthin, please, sit."
She sat. Her legs ached. Everything ached lately.
"I am Administrator Chen," the man said. "This is Commander Okoye, Specialist Reeves, Lieutenant Park, and Dr. Anand. We've been reviewing the data your government transmitted. All of it."
"Then you understand the situation," Kelthara said.
"We understand what you've told us," Chen replied. His voice was calm, almost gentle. 7 core worlds lost, 16 colony systems compromised, 43 defensive fleets destroyed or scattered. Estimated total casualties approaching 130 billion across the entire theater. He paused. "That's in the last 4 months. 4 months and 11 days, Kelthara corrected automatically. 4 months and 11 days, Chen echoed, and the enemy shows no signs of slowing down.
No. The word came out harder than she intended. No, they do not slow down. They do not negotiate. They do not communicate beyond basic tactical signaling. They simply advance, system by system, and they erase everything they find.
One of the humans near the display, Commander Okoye, she thought, turned slightly. "The species you call the Veil. We've reviewed the xenological data. Silicon-based, hive-networked, technological level approximately on par with the Conclave. No known origin point. First contact occurred 9 months ago when they emerged from the galactic edge and began systematic extermination protocols." "You summarize efficiently," Kelthara said. Chen leaned forward, folding his hands on the table. "Ambassador, your government has requested military assistance from the Terran Commonwealth, specifically access to our defensive networks, tactical intelligence, and potential fleet support. Is that correct?"
Yes.
"Why?" "Because we are losing," she said quietly. "Because in another 6 months, perhaps less, the Conclave will cease to exist as a coherent political entity. Because we have exhausted conventional strategies, and our projections show total collapse across all remaining defensive lines by mid-cycle." She paused, forcing herself to meet Chen's steady gaze. "Because we have nowhere else to turn." "That's not what I asked," Chen said. His tone hadn't changed, still calm, still gentle. Somehow that made it worse. "I asked why you're asking us, humanity specifically." Silence filled the room for 5 full seconds. Then Chen nodded once. "Dr. Anand, can you show the ambassador the projections?" The woman at the display, young South Asian features wearing glasses she almost certainly didn't need, tapped a command into her tablet. The wall screens shifted, showing a 3-dimensional map of the entire conflict zone. Red markers indicated Veil-controlled space. Blue showed Conclave holdings. The red was spreading like spilled blood across a white cloth. "We've been watching," Dr. Anand said quietly. "Since the first reports came through 9 months ago. We've monitored every engagement, analyzed every tactical pattern, modeled the Veil's strategic behavior across 4,000 discrete combat scenarios." She highlighted a sector near the galactic rim. "They're not just conquering, they're erasing. Complete sterilization of every biosphere they encounter. No occupation, no resource extraction beyond basic refueling. Just extermination."
"We know," Kelthara said. "Do you know why?"
"No, they do not communicate. We have tried." Dr. Anand nodded slowly. "We have a theory. It's not comforting." "Nothing about this situation is comforting, Doctor." "Fair point." Anand adjusted her glasses. "We think they're cleaning, preparing. The pattern of their advance isn't random. It's methodical, almost agricultural. They're clearing space for something. We don't know what. Maybe colonization on a scale we can't imagine. Maybe something else. But the behavior profile suggests purpose, not simple aggression." Kelthara felt cold again. You are saying this will not end with the conclave?
No, Chen said flatly. It won't. If they're not stopped, they'll continue. Through conclave space, through the neutral zones, through the entire galactic arm. Eventually, he gestured at the map, eventually they'll reach us.
Then you understand, Kelthara said, that this is not charity we're asking for. This is mutual survival.
We understand perfectly, Commander Okoye said. She had moved closer to the table, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture that reminded Kelthara of military discipline from a dozen different species. The question is timing and scale.
I don't understand. Chen stood slowly, walking to the viewport that dominated the far wall. Ambassador, how much do you know about human military doctrine?
Very little, Kelthara admitted. Your species has been classified as restricted contact for most of the past century. Our intelligence on your capabilities is limited.
Limited, Chen repeated, almost smiling. That's diplomatic. The truth is, the Conclave has spent 100 years assuming we're dangerous children, playing with weapons we barely understand. Volatile, unpredictable, best kept at arm's length. Yes, Kelthara said. There was no point in denying it.
Were you afraid of us?
The question caught her off guard. She considered lying, then discarded the impulse. What did it matter now? Yes, your history is troubling. The wars you fought against yourselves, the destruction you inflicted on your own world, your own people, the speed at which you developed weapons technology compared to your social development. Yes, we were afraid. We thought you might turn that capacity for violence outward. And we didn't.
No, you remained quiet, respectful of boundaries. You built carefully, slowly. You made no aggressive moves.
Chen turned to face her. Did you ever wonder why? Kelthara opened her mouth, then closed it again. She had wondered. In quiet moments, in academic papers she had written but never published, in late-night conversations with colleagues who shared her curiosity but not her willingness to speak it aloud. The humans were restrained, yes, but it felt like restraint, not passivity, like pressure contained, not pressure absent. We thought perhaps you had matured, she said finally, evolved past your violent tendencies. No, Chen said softly. We just learned when to use them. Something in his tone made her skin prickle. Administrator Chen, what exactly are you telling me? He returned to the table, sitting down with the careful movements of someone conserving energy for a long journey ahead. I'm telling you that the Terran Commonwealth will provide military assistance to the Conclave, full integration of tactical networks, real-time intelligence sharing, coordinated defensive operations across all threatened sectors. He paused. And we're going to deploy the Shadow Fleet. The name meant nothing to her. I am not familiar with this designation.
No one is, Lieutenant Park said. He had been silent until now, a compact man with Korean features and eyes that looked like they missed nothing. That's the point.
Dr. Anand brought up a new image on the display. At first, Kelthara thought it was a star chart, then realized she was looking at something else entirely, a network, vast and complex, stretching across multiple systems, thousands of nodes connected by invisible threads of communication and logistics. After the Proxima incident, Anand said quietly, humanity had a choice. We could continue as we were, small, careful, trying not to draw attention, or we could prepare, really prepare, for the thing we knew would eventually come.
What thing? Kelthara asked.
The thing that ends the galaxy if we're not ready, Chen said. We didn't know what it would look like. The veil, something else, but we knew it would come, because it always does. History teaches that lesson very clearly, if you're willing to learn it. Commander Okoye touched a control. The display shifted, zooming in to one of the nodes. Kelthara saw what looked like a shipyard, but the scale was wrong. Too large, too distributed. "We've spent 70 years building in secret," Okoye said. "Not hiding exactly, just not advertising. While the Conclave was watching our public fleet, the colony ships, the commercial vessels, the small defensive force we kept visible, we were building something else, in the deep dark, in the places between systems where no one looks because there's nothing to see."
"How many ships?" Kelthara heard herself ask. Silence. Then Chen said, "Enough."
The word hung in the air like a promise. Or a threat. "I need more than that," Kelthara said. "The Council will need numbers, specifications, tactical data." "And they'll get it," Chen assured her. "But right now, what I need you to understand is this: humanity is going to war. Not a defensive action, not a limited engagement. War. Complete, total, civilization-level commitment. We're going to stop the Veil, and once we start, there's no going back." Kelthara felt her pulse quicken. "What are you asking me?" "Permission," Chen said simply. "The Conclave is a sovereign government. We won't violate your territory without authorization, but if we do this, we do it our way. Our ships, our tactics, our command structure. We'll coordinate with your forces, share intelligence, protect your civilians, but the operational decisions will be ours." That is asking for considerable trust. "Yes. From a species my government has spent a century treating as dangerous outcasts." Kelthara looked at each of them in turn. Chen with his tired eyes and calm certainty. Okoye with her military bearing and absolute focus. Park, Reeves, Anand, all watching her with the same steady, patient attention, waiting for her decision, waiting for her to trust them with everything. "If I authorize this," she said slowly, "if the Council agrees, what happens next?" "We unseal the Shadow Fleet," Chen said, "and we go to work." The next 18 hours were a blur of compressed transmissions, emergency council sessions, and negotiations conducted across vast distances at speeds that made Kelthara's head ache. The Conclave Council, what remained of it, debated behind closed channels. Arguments flew, pride clashed with desperation. Some advocated surrender. Some advocated fighting alone to the end. Some simply sat in silence, too exhausted to contribute. In the end, it was the numbers that decided it. The projections that showed complete collapse in 6 months. The casualty estimates that climbed into the trillions if nothing changed. The simple, brutal mathematics of extinction. The Council voted 13-7 with 4 abstentions.
"Authorization granted."
Kelthara delivered the decision personally, standing in Conference 7 at 0300 station time, her hands shaking with fatigue and something that might have been fear. Chen received the news with a single nod. "Thank you, Ambassador. We'll begin immediately." "How long," she asked, "before we see results?" "The first elements are already moving," he said. "Full deployment will take approximately 72 hours. First contact with Veil forces, 4 to 5 days, depending on their advance rate." "So soon?" Kelthara felt dizzy. "What do you need from us?" "Stay out of the way," Okoye said, not unkindly. "Pull your remaining fleets back to defensive positions around core worlds. Protect your civilians. Let us handle the Veil." "That is asking us to trust you with our survival." Yes, Chen said. It is. The first sign that something had changed came 31 hours later. Kelthara was trying to sleep, badly, when her communicator chimed with an urgent summons. She dragged herself to the command center, arriving to find it crowded with conclave personnel staring at the tactical displays with expressions of confusion and growing alarm.
"What is it?" she demanded.
Fleet Coordinator Hessian turned to her, his face pale. "Ambassador, we're detecting massive energy signatures emerging from the deep dark. Dozens of them. Hundreds. They're not on any registry. They're not broadcasting standard identification protocols. They're just appearing."
Kelthara pushed through to the main display. The screen showed the sector between conclave space and the advancing Veil front line, a region that had been empty except for scattered monitoring stations and the debris of failed defensive actions.
Now it was filling with light.
Ships. Hundreds of ships, dropping out of faster-than-light transit with the coordinated precision of a dance. They were dark, hulls painted in colors that seemed to drink in starlight, and their profiles were strange, sleek, predatory, nothing like the utilitarian designs she was used to seeing from human commercial vessels.
"Those are human ships," someone whispered.
"That's impossible," Hessian said. "Humanity doesn't have that many military vessels. Our intelligence says—"
"Your intelligence," a voice said from behind them, "was incomplete."
Kelthara turned. Commander Okoye stood in the doorway, still wearing the same gray uniform, looking no different than she had 30 hours ago. But something in her bearing had changed. Or perhaps nothing had changed. Perhaps this had always been there, and Kelthara was only now seeing it clearly.
"What are we looking at?" Kelthara asked.
"The first and third response fleets," Okoye said, walking to the display. "Approximately 400 vessels per fleet, cruisers, destroyers, carriers, support craft. They've been stationed in the deep dark for the past 40 years, rotating crews, maintaining readiness, waiting."
400 ships, Hessian breathed. Each! That's a military force equivalent to our entire defensive navy. Was equivalent, Okoye corrected gently, before you lost most of it.
The words stung, because they were true.
"And this is the Shadow Fleet?" Kelthara asked. "This is part of it," Okoye said. "The first and third are our rapid response elements. We have 12 more fleets positioning now. Different capabilities, different roles." She highlighted a region of space far behind the current lines. "The fifth and seventh are heavy siege fleets, designed for sustained operations against fortified positions. The second and fourth are carrier groups, long-range strike capability. The ninth and 10th are specialized for anti-swarm tactics." She paused. "We built them for different contingencies, different threats, but they all have one thing in common." "What?" "They were designed to win." The first contact happened 4 days later, exactly as Chen had predicted.
The Veil had been advancing steadily toward the conclave core worlds, consuming system after system with mechanical efficiency. Their fleet elements moved in coordinated waves, thousands of vessels acting as a single organism, overwhelming defensive positions through sheer weight of numbers and perfect tactical synchronization.
They hit the human lines at a system-designated Threshold 7, a minor waypoint with no strategic value beyond its position on the route to more valuable targets.
Kelthara watched the engagement from the command center, her hearts hammering against her ribs as the tactical display updated in real time. The Veil fleet, at least 3,000 vessels, emerged from FTL and immediately began their standard approach pattern. No hesitation, no reconnaissance, just the relentless forward push that had crushed 43 conclave fleets.
The human response was different.
The first fleet didn't rush forward to meet them.
didn't form defensive lines or attempt to hold static positions. Instead, they moved like water, flowing, reforming, never quite where the veil expected them to be. Their weapons fire was precise, concentrated, targeting not the bulk of the enemy fleet, but specific vessels, command nodes, communication hubs, the organizational structure that allowed the veil to operate as a unified whole.
And when the veil adapted, shifting their formation to compensate, the humans adapted faster.
Kelthara watched a veil-heavy cruiser, the same class that had shattered conclave dreadnoughts, explode under concentrated fire from 6 human destroyers that appeared, struck, and vanished back into their defensive formation before the surrounding veil vessels could respond. She watched a conclave monitoring station, previously assumed lost, light up with human marines who had somehow boarded it, fortified it, and were using it as a fire base to control the entire engagement zone.
She watched the Veil fleet, for the first time in 9 months, falter. The battle lasted 16 hours. When it ended, the Veil had retreated, actually retreated, leaving behind 700 destroyed vessels and an entire sector they had considered already conquered. Kelthara found Chen in a small briefing room, reviewing after-action reports with the same calm focus he brought to everything.
He looked up. We held. That's not the same thing.
The Veil retreated. They have never retreated. They retreated because they encountered something unexpected, Chen said. They'll analyze what happened, adapt. The next engagement will be harder.
But you'll win that, too.
Chen was quiet for a moment. Ambassador, I need you to understand something. What you saw at Threshold 7 was a single battle. The Veil control thousands of systems. They have resources we can't even estimate. This isn't going to be quick. It isn't going to be easy. People are going to die. A lot of people, human and conclave both. But you believe you can win.
I believe, Chen said carefully, that humanity has learned how to survive things that should have killed us, and we've learned how to make that survival expensive for anything that tries to end us.
The war that followed was unlike anything in Kelthara's experience or education. The Conclave fought wars of doctrine and strategy, careful maneuvers executed according to principles refined over millennia. The Veil fought with the efficiency of a natural force, unstoppable and inevitable.
Humanity fought differently.
They fought like they were personally offended by the concept of extinction.
Kelthara spent weeks in the command center, watching the tactical displays shift and flow as the human fleets moved across the conflict zone. They didn't defend territory the way the Conclave did, holding ground for pride or strategic doctrine. They defended people. When a Conclave colony was threatened, human forces appeared, not always in overwhelming numbers, but always enough. Always precisely calibrated to the threat. And they never fought the same way twice. The Veil adapted to human tactics at Threshold 7. The next battle, the humans used completely different strategies. The Veil adapted to those. The third engagement introduced weapons systems no one had known humanity possessed. The fourth revealed coordination protocols that suggested an intelligence network far more sophisticated than anything the Conclave had developed. It was exhausting to watch, exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. Kelthara began to notice patterns in the human personnel around her. They were always quiet, always polite. They asked after her health, offered her coffee, bitter human stimulant that she had learned to tolerate, and answered questions with patient clarity. But beneath that surface courtesy, there was something else, something that reminded her of a blade in a sheath, present, controlled, but capable of terrible speed if drawn.
6 weeks into the war, she asked Okoye about it. They were standing in the observation gallery, Kelthara's refuge now shared, watching distant flashes of light that marked another engagement 12 light-years away.
"Your people," Kelthara said slowly, "they seem calm, even when the casualty reports come in, even when you lose ships, personnel. There's grief, but no panic, no despair. How?"
Okoye was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know what Earth was like before we reached the stars?"
"I have read the historical summaries."
"Summaries," Okoye repeated. "Those probably tell you about the wars, the resource crises, the near-extinction events, the fact that we almost destroyed ourselves a dozen times over."
Yes. Did they tell you what we learned from it?
Kelthara shook her head.
Okoye turned to face her. "We learned that surviving isn't about being strong. It's about being stubborn, about refusing to quit even when quitting is the logical choice. We learned that humans individually are fragile, weak, short-lived, but humans together, committed to something larger than themselves?" She paused. "That's a different equation entirely." "The Conclave has unity as well," Kelthara said, hearing the defensiveness in her own voice. "We have maintained a coherent civilization for 12,000 years.
"You've maintained stability," Okoye said. "That's not the same thing. Stability is about avoiding risk, about controlling variables. Unity, real unity, is about facing risks together, about trusting that when you fall, someone will catch you, and when they fall, you'll catch them." She gestured at the distant battle. "Every person in that fleet knows that if they die today, someone else will continue the fight. Not because of orders, not because of doctrine.
Because humanity doesn't leave things unfinished." Kelthara felt something crack in her chest. "We are dying. My people, my entire civilization is dying, and you speak of unity as if it's simple?" "It's not simple," Okoye said gently. "It's the hardest thing in the universe, but it's also the only thing that matters when the universe tries to kill you." The turning point came 3 months into the war. The Veil had consolidated their forces, pulling back from scattered systems to mass for a decisive assault on the Conclave core worlds. Intelligence estimated 40,000 vessels, maybe more. It was more than the Veil had deployed in any previous operation, more than the Conclave could possibly stop. The Council convened in emergency session. Kelthara listened to the debate, increasingly desperate, increasingly fatalistic, and felt the weight of history pressing down on her. 12,000 years, all of it ending here. Then Chen requested a direct channel to the Council. She watched him on the display, standing in what looked like a ship's bridge, surrounded by activity but projecting absolute calm. "Honored Council," he said, "we are aware of the Veil fleet concentration. We've been tracking their movements for the past 2 weeks. They're positioning for a final push. They expect to overwhelm your remaining defenses through sheer numbers." "Can you stop them?" someone on the council asked. The voice was raw with exhaustion.
"Yes," Chen said simply.
The silence that followed was profound.
"How?" Kelthara asked.
Chen glanced off-screen at something, then back. "We're unsealing the remainder of the Shadow Fleet, all of it. 12 fleets are already engaged. We're activating the remaining elements, 17 additional fleets, 600 vessels each, full combat loadout, specialized for coordinated operations against superior numbers." He paused. "And we're deploying the Ark Fleet." "I am not familiar with that designation," Kelthara said. "You wouldn't be. We've never talked about it." Chen's expression softened slightly. The Ark fleet is our final contingency. The thing we built in case everything else failed. It's not designed for combat, it's designed for survival. For ensuring that even if Earth falls, even if every human world is destroyed, something of us continues.
Kelfara felt cold understanding wash over her. You're saying this battle is that important?
I'm saying we're all in, Chen said. Every ship, every weapon, every strategy we've developed over 70 years of preparation. We're not holding anything back. Because if we lose this, there's no second chance. Not for you, not for us.
The Veil fleet arrived at the conclave core system of Senthar Prime 18 hours later. 43,000 vessels moving in perfect formation, advancing like a wave of darkness through the void.
And the Shadow Fleet met them.
Kelfara watched from Arcturus Secundus, her hands pressed against the viewport as space itself seemed to tear open. 29 human fleets, over 17,000 vessels, emerged from faster-than-light transit in a coordinated maneuver that should have been impossible. The precision required, the timing, the sheer coordination across thousands of vessels and billions of kilometers. It defied everything she understood about military operations. The human fleet didn't form defensive lines. They formed a net, a vast three-dimensional construct that surrounded the Veil fleet on all sides, closing like fingers around a throat.
And then they started fighting.
It wasn't like Threshold 7. There was no feeling out process, no gradual escalation. The humans struck with overwhelming, coordinated fury. Every ship moved as part of a larger whole. Every weapon fired as part of a calculated pattern. They targeted Veil command vessels with precision strikes. They disrupted formation cohesion with coordinated jamming. They used the Veil's own numbers against them, forcing ships to interfere with each other, to block firing lines, to create chaos in what should have been perfect order.
And when the Veil tried to break out, tried to punch through the encirclement, they found human forces that had anticipated exactly that response, pre-positioned, ready, waiting.
The battle lasted 37 hours. Kelfara didn't sleep, couldn't sleep. She watched as the tactical displays turned into storms of light and fire. She watched human vessels die, not in ones or twos, but in dozens, in hundreds, sacrificing themselves to hold positions, to create openings, to protect conclave worlds that had spent a century dismissing humanity as irrelevant.
She watched humanity pay the price for their promise, and she watched them never flinch.
When it ended, the Veil fleet was broken. Not defeated entirely. Their losses were catastrophic, but survivors fled in scattered groups, retreating back toward their territory. But their coordinated advance was shattered. Their momentum was gone. For the first time in 9 months, they were not dictating the terms of engagement. Human casualties, 4,217. Vessels damaged, 1,809. Destroyed. Personnel losses estimated at 243,000. Kelfara read the numbers and felt something break inside her. 250,000 humans, dead, for a civilization that had treated them as dangerous children, for people they barely knew.
She found Chen in a medical bay on Arcturus Secundus. He had injuries, nothing critical, just the sort of damage that came from being on a ship that took fire. Burns on his arms, a bandage wrapped around his head. He was refusing to rest, still coordinating pursuit operations while medical staff worked around him.
"Why?" she asked. No preamble, no politeness, just the question that had been tearing her apart.
Chen looked up from his tablet. "Ambassador?"
"Why did you do it? Why did you sacrifice so many?
For us, we spent a century keeping you at arm's length, treating you like a threat, and you just threw yourselves into the fire to save us. Why?
Chen set down the tablet slowly. He looked tired, more tired than she had ever seen him. "Because you asked," he said quietly. "Because you needed help. And because if we didn't, the veil would keep coming, and more people would die. Your people, our people, everyone."
"That's not enough," Kalthara said, her voice breaking. "That's not enough reason to lose 250,000 lives."
"You're right," Chen said. "It's not. But here's the thing about humanity, Ambassador. We don't fight because the math works out. We fight because we've seen what happens when no one fights. We've lived through the consequences of apathy, of looking the other way, of deciding that some tragedy is too big or too distant to matter." He stood slowly, wincing.
We fight because we know in our bones that the only thing worse than dying for something is living in a universe where nothing is worth dying for.
Kalthara felt tears on her face. The conclave did not cry, but she was not the conclave anymore. She was just Kalthara, 347 years old, watching the galaxy change into something unrecognizable.
"Thank you," she whispered.
Chen nodded. "You're welcome, but we're not done yet."
The war continued. Not the same war. The Veil's coordinated advance had been broken, but a different kind of conflict. Pursuit, dismantlement, systematic destruction of the scattered Veil forces. Humanity led the effort, but they didn't fight alone. Conclave fleets, rebuilt and reinforced, fought alongside human vessels. Other species, drawn by news of humanity's stand, offered support. Ships, resources, personnel.
The galaxy, it seemed, had been waiting for someone to prove that the Veil could be beaten. Humanity had provided that proof.
Kalthara spent the next year coordinating relief efforts, helping to rebuild worlds the Veil had ravaged, working alongside human administrators who approached the task with the same methodical determination they brought to war. She learned their history in depth, not summaries, the real stories, the struggles and failures and hard-won victories that had shaped them into what they were. She learned about World War II, about the Cold War, about climate collapse and the near extinction of 2087, about the unification crisis and the long, painful process of building a single human civilization from dozens of conflicting cultures. She learned that humanity's quiet restraint wasn't weakness, it was control, hard-earned and constantly maintained. And she learned that when humans chose to unleash what they had kept restrained, nothing could stop it. The final Veil stronghold fell 14 months after the Battle of Senthar Prime. Kalthara was there, aboard a conclave observer vessel, watching as human forces breached the last defensive positions of a species that had seemed unstoppable. The Veil fought to the end. No surrender, no negotiation, just the same mechanical efficiency they had shown from the beginning.
But it wasn't enough. It had never been enough, once humanity decided it wouldn't be.
In the aftermath, the Terran Commonwealth negotiated a new treaty with the Conclave. Equal partners, full exchange of technology, culture, military coordination. The restrictions were lifted. The barriers were removed. Humanity took its place not as junior members of galactic civilization, but as protectors, as the ones who had proven they would fight for others, not just themselves. Kalthara attended the signing ceremony on Earth in a city called Geneva, in a building that had witnessed centuries of human attempts at peace and cooperation. She stood next to Chen, promoted now Admiral Chen, commander of the Integrated Defense Fleet, and watched representatives from 43 species acknowledge humanity's new role.
"How does it feel?" she asked quietly.
Chen considered the question. Strange. We spent so long preparing for the worst, trying to be ready for threats we couldn't even name. And now that it's happened, now that we've proven we can handle it, he shrugged. I'm not sure we know how to do anything else.
"You'll learn," Kelthara said, "the same way you learned everything else, stubbornly."
Chen smiled. "That's fair."
They stood in silence for a moment, watching the ceremony, before Kelthara asked the question that had haunted her for months. The Shadow Fleet, all those ships, all that preparation. If the veil had never come, if there had never been a crisis, what would you have done with it? Chen's expression grew serious. Hoped we never needed it, maintained it, kept it ready, and prayed that the galaxy would stay peaceful enough that all our preparation would be wasted effort. He paused. The best-case scenario was always that no one would ever know the Shadow Fleet existed, that we'd grow old maintaining ships that never fired a shot in anger.
"And the worst case?"
"This," Chen said quietly. "The worst case was needing everything we built, and barely being enough." Kelthara thought about the casualty lists, the memorial services held across a dozen worlds, the human names she had learned to recognize, to remember, to mourn. "You were enough," she said firmly. "You saved us. You saved everyone."
We saved ourselves, too, Chen pointed out. The veil would have reached Earth eventually.
"But you didn't wait for that. You could have. Could have let us fall, preserved your strength, fought only when directly threatened. Instead, you spent everything to save people who had spent a century fearing you." Chen turned to look at her directly. "Ambassador, do you know what the real difference is between humanity and the Conclave? You built a civilization to last. We built a civilization to survive. Those aren't the same thing. Lasting is about stability, control, avoiding risks that might threaten continuity. Surviving is about adaptation, sacrifice, doing whatever it takes to see tomorrow." He gestured at the ceremony. "You created something beautiful. 12,000 years of art, science, culture, philosophy. You should be proud of that." "But it wasn't enough when the crisis came." "Actually," Chen said gently, "we do. That's exactly what happened to us. Multiple times. And each time we had to choose. Give up or adapt. Despair or evolve." He smiled. "We kept choosing adaptation. Eventually, it became instinct." The ceremony concluded. Representatives began filing out, conversation bubbling up, the relief of survival mixing with the cautious optimism of new beginnings. Kelthara and Chen remained in the hall, two people who had seen too much to celebrate carelessly.
What happens now? Kelthara asked.
"Now, we rebuild, strengthen the defensive networks, integrate our forces with yours. Make sure that if something like the Veil comes again, we're ready." Chen paused. "And we help you become ready too, not by making you more like us, but by making sure you never have to face extinction alone."
The Shadow Fleet. Will you keep it?
Yes, but not as Shadow anymore. The fleets are part of the Integrated Defense Force now, visible, accountable, working alongside Conclave forces and anyone else who wants to join. He glanced at her. No more secrets, no more hiding. We proved what we needed to prove. Now we build trust.
Kelthara nodded slowly. Trust. Such a simple concept. Such a difficult reality. They left the hall together, walking out into Earth's evening air.
Kelfara had never been to Earth before, had never imagined she would be. It was beautiful in an uncontrolled way, wild. The wind carried scents she couldn't identify. The sky was the wrong shade of blue. Everything felt slightly off balance, slightly chaotic.
It felt alive.
"Chen," she said as they reached the transport platform, "I need to ask you something personal."
Of course. During the Battle of Senthar Prime, when you deployed the entire Shadow Fleet, were you afraid?
Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Terrified," he finally said. "I kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong, all the lives depending on decisions I had made years ago before we even knew what threat we'd face. I kept thinking about the fact that if we failed, both our civilizations would fall, that billions of people would die because I wasn't smart enough or fast enough or good enough."
But you went ahead anyway. Of course. Being afraid doesn't mean you stop. It means you understand the stakes. Fear is just data, information about what matters. What you do with that information, that's character.
Kelthara looked up at Earth's sky, at stars she didn't recognize, in patterns that meant nothing to her. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not stopping, for being terrified and fighting anyway, for teaching us that survival and beauty aren't opposites, they're partners."
"You're welcome," Chen said. Then, more softly, "Thank you for trusting us. I know what that cost."
They stood together in silence, watching the alien sky, until the transport arrived to carry them to different futures. Futures that existed because humanity had unsealed the Shadow Fleet, and because nothing could stop it.
Years later, Kelthara would write a memoir. She would describe the war, the fear, the transformation of the galaxy. She would write about the Conclave's pride and its fall, about the Veil and their terrifying efficiency. But most of all, she would write about humanity, about the quiet strength she had mistaken for weakness, about the restrained power she had feared was volatility, about the species that prepared for annihilation in secret and, when called upon, spent everything they had built to save strangers. The memoir would become required reading in universities across 40 systems. Students would study it not just for its historical value, but for what it said about assumptions, about judging species by their past instead of their potential, about the difference between civilization and survival. But the line that would be most quoted, most remembered, most carved into memorials across the galaxy was simple. Earth unsealed the Shadow Fleet. Nothing could stop it. Not because they were stronger, though they were strong. Not because they were smarter, though they were clever. But because they had learned, through centuries of near extinction and hard-won survival, that the only unforgivable failure is giving up. And humanity, whatever else you might say about them, has never learned how to quit. "The stars do not care what we call them. They burned before us and will burn after. But in the space between their light, in the darkness where civilizations rise and fall, humanity carved a message that echoed across the void. We are here. We will fight. And we do not abandon those who ask for help." Nothing could stop that. Nothing ever would.